Communications for Business. This presentation is presented by Nicole Newman of Newman Networks, and today's date is October 23rd, 2014. In this presentation, we will actually talk about the importance of communication and how it affects everybody in your business. When we say in your business, we're talking about all types of people, the CEO, the CFO, the managers, the general managers, the employees, your customer service, your vendors, the people who make the products and services, the marketing department, and your internal and external stakeholders. So the agenda for tonight's presentation is a little background about me and my role in my business. What is communication? The communication process, communication channels, the difference between effective communication and ineffective communication, communication as leadership styles. Who are our stakeholders? Let's define the audience, and subtle communication, also known as business etiquette. We will also discuss some communication strategies for team building. It's always easier to do everything in a team, and that's why we're going to emphasize how we can use communication to get everybody on board of the mission. Then we'll talk about some next steps. What can you do to communicate better within your business? So who is Nicole Newman? Nicole Newman is your host for this evening and a graduate of the High School of Engineering and Science, a graduate of Temple University. I received my MBA from the University of Maryland. I spent about 6 years in the DC area. Then I came to the Philadelphia area and worked for a top 4 accounting firm called Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, and where I learned entrepreneurship skills, and that is entrepreneurship, but just in an internal organization. Then I left that opportunity to become the president and CEO of Newman Networks, my current position, and I've been doing this for about 8 years. I love bringing technology tools to small business. Because I love my job so much, I was recognized as an awardee for outstanding leadership and a different award for creative marketing. So on the journey, I'm always looking at different distribution models. So one of the models that we use are books. I'm currently working on book number 5 for National Novel Writing Month, and that's called NaNoWriMo.org. And I've completed 4 books, 2 nonfiction, 2 business books. In the last 18 months, I have, along with Tara Colquitt, who is also known as the Credit Woman, co-founded a group organization called we affectionately call that CAFE. So we teach women business owners how information technology. I have my undergraduate degree in Management Information Systems from Temple University. This graphic definitely explains how communication is missed. The first picture shows how the customer explained what they wanted. They wanted a swing on a tree with multiple levels, and that's how it was interpreted. Then the project leader understood differently from what the customer explained. So he put the 2 branches in the middle of the tree. So the analyst took the information and designed it with 2 branches and saw that the swing won't work if it's in the middle, so they cut the tree and gave the tree branches on the side. So that's what the analyst interpreted the requirements to be. Then the programmer wrote it completely differently than how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it. He put the 2 strings around the tree with the seat on the ground. So what the beta testers received after the programmer wrote it is a string with no seat at all. And of course, this whole project wasn't documented. So the 6th picture actually shows the project wasn't documented at all because there's no tree, there's no string, there's no seat. But the customer received the bill that showed it was a roller coaster, which had nothing to do with the string on the tree. And it was supported minimally because they gave it just a stump of support. Now, marketing, of course, advertised something beautiful, similar to what the customer explained, and put a logo on it and made the tree black and just made it all beautiful. But what the customer really needed was just a tire and 1 branch of the string. So it went through 10 iterations, and nobody got it right. That's what happens when we have ineffective communication. And this happens all the time in our daily lives. Here's another example. Somebody calls, and this is at the advent of voicemail, and it says, "You'll reach the doctor's practice voice box. You can leave a message. However, we don't monitor this voice box." After being put on hold for 3 times by the doctor's receptionist, Gina is passed to their practice voicemail that they don't check. So the message was sent, but communication did not occur because it was not received. And that's what happens with a lot of our communication. We think that since a message was sent, that it means it was received, and that is not communication. Another example, and this happens a lot in doctor's offices, it's just so hard because they have very short timelines. And they were supposed to lift on 3, but everybody had a different interpretation of 3, and so the man is down on the floor, and everybody's pointing fingers. So we have to understand the importance of communication in our business and set up systems and strategies in place so not only is the message sent, but the message also is received. So Business Dictionary defines communication as a 2-way process of reaching mutual understanding in which participants not only exchange, encode, decode information, news, ideas, and feelings, but build and share meaning. In general, communication is a means of connecting people or places. In business, it is a key function of management. An organization cannot operate without communication between levels, departments, and employees. I work in marketing, so my definition is marketing is communication. And when I say this, most businesses don't spend enough time setting up the processes and procedures for the frontline people. When you go to Walmart, what you see is the cashier and the person that says hello. You might be buying products, but you're buying the experience. And so people go to Target, even though they're going to pay more money, because it saves them time in the long run, because they know that Target will open up a line if they see more than 3 people in line. It is not necessarily that I see in Walmart that lots of lines are open. And this is a key stat to remember. Some say 80%. I've seen up to 95. People know that communication, most communication, is nonverbal. And that is why I do not consider text communication, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the message was received. So if you send a text, that doesn't mean you communicated. So let's get into that a little bit more. So communication channels, face-to-face. That's a complete communication channel because the sender and receiver are not separated by time or distance. So face-to-face means we're not only communicating what is said, but how that comes with the shaking of the head. So we're reading all of that. And if people don't believe me, we communicate all the time with our animals. Our animals are not talking English, but we communicate all the time with them. We communicate with children as we try to interpret what the crying means, or baby. So we communicate with a lot of people or animals or other things that is not verbal. We have to read the signs. We have to know the feelings. We have to sense the emotion. Some of it comes over the phone. Not all of it, but some does. Some comes through voicemail. Text messaging, I don't consider a complete communication channel, and when I want an answer, I say, please respond, yes or no. One of the rules that I use is never communicate bad news over text. Actually, if you can get a face-to-face, that's the best way. If it has to be by telephone, that's acceptable, but you really want to sense the emotion. And when you're communicating bad news, are there questions that we can ask to get to an agreement so that people understand? And I'll give you an example. Let's just say there's an employee review, and somebody wants a raise and somebody's not going to get a raise. It has to be communicated in a way that they know what the next steps are, what will happen next, so that everybody leaves and feels comfortable so the relationship can continue. So when we communicate, what is our objective? And that is why I don't communicate bad news over text. Email. Email is just verbal communication, but there is no body language. So email is a good place to get stuff, information out, but we also need to receive information. Social media has opened up all these other avenues for communication. But we have to be cognizant that just because it was sent, are we sending a message back that says received? Most times breakdowns of communication happen because people stop communicating. They just stop communicating. They don't want to give bad news, so they don't give any news at all, which means we have a break in the communication channel. So what is effective communication? Effective communication strategies always involve two-way, so that the message is sent and there is a response needed. And that is how we communicate our next steps. What do we want to achieve? How can we make this better? Open-ended questions so that we're not just directing information out. Companies whose managers successfully engage employees about their work and their perspective on issues related to products, services, customers, and the business develop a culture of inclusiveness that generates results. Ask our employees to think. Ask our employees to make the business better. They deal with the customers more than the managers and the CFOs. So they get the information back faster, but is that information being used to make the business better? And that is why communication that just directs, pushes information down is not as effective as communication that engages employees. Business communication should be results-driven and strategically focused on achieving measurable results. Well, the employee mentality says that I get paid to work a number of hours, but how can we set up the job, the description, the yearly reviews that the employee is engaged in the results of the business, that they know their job matters to making a better business that makes more money, that gives them more money. So that's why we have to have communication strategies that show transparency. What are the results of the business and how can we make that better for everyone? So it's a win-win mentality. Organizational communicators know that messages need to be delivered multiple times in multiple ways to have the most impact. That is the same thing that we teach in marketing. Information is coming in all the time. So if a commercial comes on TV, 1,000 commercials that come on within a 24-hour span, so you have to make sure that message is sent in different ways. So you can communicate on social media, you can make a phone call, you can make an email. You can communicate it 3 ways, 3 different times over a short time frame, and then make it 2-way that we want results. Using multiple communication channels to communicate with various audiences will increase the odds that communications are received and understood. This was a little tricky, and I can tell you why people don't think about it. In my business, I'm always communicating about technology and how technology can be better. But I know that it's effective when a different person says the same thing that I'm saying. That is getting congruency, that people are saying the same thing. So I don't think that it always just has to be me. It has to be what they teach us in marketing is what we call a multitude of voices, because it makes congruency in the end user's mind. And that end user could be an employee. The end user could be a manager. The end user for my business is usually the president of a company. That is some of the strategies for effective communication. Communication becomes a leadership style. Communication should never be one way, either from top down or bottom up. That means we're directing information down or we're asking for information to come up, but it's not necessarily communication because it wasn't 2-way. Inclusive communication strategy is one with explicit steps are taking to ensure that employees feel they're involved in the decisions that affect their day-to-day. I learned this very well at Deloitte. Deloitte did not pay the most, but every employee felt empowered in their job, that their job was one piece of a bigger puzzle, and that their job was important to the bigger puzzle. Organizations with a secretive environment shut people out, which can stifle involvement and result in lost ideas and opportunities. I see that in a lot of small businesses. That's called a lack of transparency. And what a lack of transparency means, people don't like their jobs, that there is no growth. So they don't get involved because they can't see how their job affects the bottom line. That's when people say, I'm just coming for a paycheck. And that's the employee morale that affects the bottom line of the organization. Employee involvement is a key factor that affects employee satisfaction and success. They say employee or manager. So the management between the worker and the manager so the communication between the worker and the manager affects job employee satisfaction. If you keep employees longer, then the turnover rate is lower, and then the companies are more profitable because that person knows their job and they don't have to retrain a new person. Communication is a motivating factor, and the objective of leadership is to get the stakeholders to act. So if we have a communication style that motivates people, it gets them to act, which overall should affect the growth of the bottom line for everyone. So who are our stakeholders? Let's just look at the left side of this graph. Most of us know that we have stakeholders within an organization that includes employees, the manager, the owner for the company. But we also have stakeholders who are very important that are external to the company, and that is the suppliers. Because if the suppliers don't get the supplies in right, the employees can't manufacture, and then there's lost work hours, and then there's overtime because the communication was missed. So if the suppliers communicate when the expected raw materials are received by the company, it lowers the company's cost because they're not paying overtime. So the external stakeholder is also society. When we pollute our waters by manufacturers, it affects everybody who drinks the water. That's why the government has to get involved, so the government can protect the natural resources of the company that are being affected by the natural resources of the United States or whatever country that are being affected by the company. The creditors who are set to get paid from the company are very much external stakeholders who need to be communicated that sales were good or bad, that affects the lines of credit, that affects the business's ability to pay. The shareholders, they need to know the quarterly reports are accurate and what those quarterly reports mean so they can see their money growing or not growing, and if it's not growing, why? The customers. This, I'll give you a very good example. One of my favorite stores is Wawa. I love their coffee. And they changed cups, and the cups had an odor on them. So it wasn't the coffee that was not good. It was the smell of the cup. But from a customer's perspective, we couldn't tell if they changed the coffee. So their sales decreased just because they made a change in cups, but the cup had an odor. So all these suppliers, customers, employees, managers, owners, all have a stake in health and well-being of the company. So if they all have a stake, then the communication strategy must be inclusive, that everybody is involved in what goes on. So you want to have a communication strategy that shows a bit of transparency. You don't have to give away the secrets of the company or how everything is manufactured, but it just has to have a communication strategy that shows you not just the ups but also the downs, and what, if there's a down, what is the company doing to change it? So subtle communication is business etiquette. The first time I actually got a professional job at Cigna, we went out to a dinner event, and I ordered spaghetti, and I had no idea what a mess it would be ordering spaghetti and not knowing what fork goes with what. Maybe that's why I went back to grad school, and we had an etiquette class just to know what's our salad fork and our dinner fork and our dessert fork and our coffee spoon. It's the same thing with your business. Is your business's external image professional to be treated as a professional? Nowadays in business, we like to get away with not having a website because we think social media is all the buzz, but you still need a website. That's how you say you're professional. And that's actually a cheaper cost because 15 years ago, to have a business or to be treated as a professional, you had to have an office address. That was a requirement to say I have a professional business, I have an office downtown. So having a website is a much cheaper cost than having a professional office in a building downtown. And in some professions, that is still a requirement. So let's just say now you have a website, but you have to make sure you have invested in a professional email address. If it ends in a free service as Yahoo, Gmail, Verizon, Comcast, it's not tied to your website. So if anybody can set it up for free, how do you separate yourself from Joe Blow down the street who put up a website and got a Gmail address? How do you say, I'm a professional and this is what I do and I'm good at what I do? That's where your testimonials come in. That's the edification. People want to know how good you are. So is your external image professional for the communication strategy that says, I'm a professional? Wear professional attire. You might have went to the gym in the morning. You have to know that that's not going to be unacceptable to go to a business meeting. Anytime between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., professional attire is required because you are doing business and constantly selling yourself everywhere. And so if you're constantly selling yourself everywhere, do you have business cards on you at all times so that you can say, this is my website, this is my email address, these are my testimonials, and you can put them on the back of your card. Lots of people don't use the back of their card. That's a great place for testimonials. And let's just say you have a large social media presence. Say what your large social media presence is on your business card. If you have a nice testimonial, add it there. Can you accept electronic payment? Or do you still just deal in cash and checks? So have we implemented 21st century technologies to not only get paid faster, but pay others faster? And are we using the communication style of win-win? Are we on each other's teams? And that's with our suppliers and with our customers and with our employees. So it's not just a communication style dealing with this particular group, but it's a communication style that cuts across every area of your business. That communication style should hopefully show that you're a team player. And a team player not only edifies themselves, but learns to edify other people along the way. So that's the external image of a professional that we want to communicate in subtle communication. I have to find my mouse to go on to the next slide. So what are some communication strategies for team building? One of them is definitely listening. I recently saw a cartoon that said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it in proportion. So that means that we need to listen twice as much as we talk. Everybody likes to hear their name. In marketing, we call it WFIIM, and that stands for what's in it for me. So if you use names, that gets a person's attention. So learn to find other people's names and use them often. Don't waste anybody's time and get right to the point. Let others talk, and that goes back to listening twice as much as we speak. What I like to do, and this is a communication strategy that I use and I like to be used on me, start the conversation with a compliment. Positive people buy more and they respond better. So you want to get a smile before we give any bad news. And also, if they know bad news is coming, break the ice. Make the atmosphere smooth. In corporate America, we used to call it the sandwich conversation. You start with a compliment, give them the bad news, and end with a compliment, so that you wrap the bad news in a sandwich. On what is our nonverbal language? Is it speaking inclusiveness with a hug, or is it speaking I'm standoffish and I'm standing with my arms crossed? So know that we communicate non-verbally too. And what are our vocal cues? Our vocal cues mean, are we talking loud, we're trying to drown somebody out, or are we listening and asking those reflective questions? And one of the communication strategies that I use a lot says, when you get the information, say, this is how I understood you to say it. And did you mean this? So that we get to an agreement. That's an atmosphere of openness. And you can only build an atmosphere of openness if you're transparent. An open communication environment is one in which all members of the organization feel free to share feedback, ideas, and even criticism. Leaders who are committed to open communication build an environment of trust that can be the foundation for success. With a relationship of trust, all communication doesn't have to be directing. Employees are trusted with their job, so they'll go over and above. And when you get people to go over and above, that means it is communicated well, because we would like employees to go over and above. And actually, I'm going to take a second to bring that back to the point, because if they're going over and above, then that has to be reflected in the annual reviews, and that's where the trust is, and that's where the raises are, so that they're going over and above and rewarded for it. So your employee compensation must match your communication strategy. So not all communication is positive communication. How can we make resolution techniques that are still communicated for win-wins? One of the fallacies that I see happen a lot is people make a judgment based on only hearing one side of the story. So there's always that person that has to go run and tell somebody first. And then what happens is, if that person is not aware, they start making judgments, and by the time they've gone to the second person, they've already made a decision. That's not good. So when that happens, we have to be cognizant that we're getting information, not just data, because everybody will paint a story that works for their best interest. That's why we say history is his story, because usually it's just one side. So what else we have to do is make sure we ask clarifying questions, and that is, I interpreted it to mean. So there isn't a miscommunication on what happened. And sometimes when I'm not really sure, I will take out a piece of paper and a pencil to write down the steps, because maybe we can hear it better if we see it. Some people are visual. Some people hear better than others. Don't make assumptions. And that's going back to asking clarifying questions. If we ask clarifying questions, we don't have to make any assumptions. Analogies are a great way to get the message across, and positive thinking usually helps. How can we resolve this that both sides benefit? And get the people involved to come up with their own resolution. What really has helped me in the past, if we look at the bigger picture of the relationship, we want to maintain a successful relationship with the client. This is one example that happened to me. I ordered some promotional pens. I expected the pens to come out one way, but they came out a different way. So what I did was I didn't say anything, but I got the money order to actually pay for the pens, and I said, well, they really weren't what I expected. So I paid for them and told them the check was coming. But they knew that since I had put the relationship first by paying for it, they ordered me a whole new set of pens in the design that I wanted. So it was a win-win, because I got the pens I wanted, plus I got the pens that I didn't want, so I actually had 2 shipments of pens. The client got their money for the shipment, and the client knows I will order work from them again because they put the relationship first. What I found is people don't necessarily, we're all inhuman. Sometimes bad things happen. It's normal, but so the expectations are realized on another job. So that's one example of putting the relationship first. But another example would be allow others to suggest resolutions. We say 2 heads are better than 1. So how can we open up our communication strategy that we say, this is my opinion on how I would resolve it. How would you? There are 2 books that I like to emphasize. One is called Getting to Yes, and that helps people work on compromise. And the other book is Negotiation Skills. And in negotiation skills, the objective is to don't stop negotiating until both sides agree. Or if it's been drawn out, how can we agree to disagree and that the relationship will continue to go on? So those are the resolution techniques that have to be worked out within communication. And most of them don't get worked out if people stop communicating. And then the relationship loses because there's going to be a level of distrust. So there's no reason for them to do business again. That's actually the last slide in this presentation. I will send you an email following this presentation with the names and the authors of the 2 books that I read to help get better communication. This is one part of just seeing how important communication is in your business. But we can talk about more communication, how technology is useful in terms of communication techniques, and how to build that era of transparency and openness, not only in a communication strategy, but the leadership styles, but the employee compensation strategy, and the vendor-supplier relationship, so they feel a level of trust, so the vendors and suppliers are willing to give 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day payment terms because we're working to build relationships. We can do all this at some upcoming events from Newman Networks. One of the next events will be LinkedIn 102. I have a business profile, What's Next. I have about 5,000, actually it's about 3,500 people on my LinkedIn account, and how you turn that into online relationship into offline business. You can also see what's going on the directory of businesses and how we're working to build Philadelphia as a better place to live, work, and play on newmannetwork.com. As I talked about it, we also have a group. The group is mainly on Facebook right now. So I have a message, and it's on Calling All Female Entrepreneurs, and we have a website called phillycafe.org. And join us again this Thursday at 7 p.m. for accounting metrics needed to implement a marketing strategy and budget. And next Monday, November 3rd, we're going to talk about how to work your network in preparation for the LinkedIn 102 class that is happening on November 6th. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you for the Women's Opportunity Resource Center for hosting this webinar so we can give out this information. Please go back to the WORC entrepreneurship training that talks about and helps people learn how to start and operate a business, develop a business plan, and receive technical assistance from professionals. WORC also has a micro-lending loan program, and the application is all online. They say in business it takes money to make money, and so with your small business plan, you can get a small business loan. The loans range from $1,000 to $35,000, and the credit woman will help you look at your credit to increase your credit score because you still need credit for a small business loan. Some of the resources for tonight's presentation came from Business Dictionary, Top 7 for Business expert Sheila Dix, Crone.com, Small Business, and CareersPDA.org. This SlideShare presentation is on www.slideshare.net/Nicole Newman. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope to talk to you again and hear your input on Thursday, October 30th, 2014. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.